What started as a quiet Minnesota welfare investigation has now exploded into a $9 billion federal nightmare. Tonight, it's no longer staying in Minnesota because this isn't just about fraud anymore. This isn't just about bad oversight. And this sure as hell isn't just about one program gone wrong. This is about Congress finally being forced to act. Federal investigators are now staring at the numbers that are so large, so reckless, and so brazen that Washington can no longer pretend that this is still just a local issue. Billions in taxpayer money, multiple programs, years of unchecked payouts, and a political ecosystem that allowed it to grow until it became impossible to hide. And now, Ilhan Omar is right at the center of the fallout. Not because of rhetoric, not because of tweets, but because her district has become ground zero for one of the largest fraud scandals tied to federal welfare dollars in modern history. That's why Republicans are no longer whispering. That's why they are no longer issuing statements. They're openly talking about removal of Ilhan Omar, expulsion, accountability, and whether Congress has the spine to police its own when the numbers get this big. Now, here's the part that they don't want you thinking about. If $9 billion can vanish through compassion programs in one state, how many others are still hiding out in the same rot? Well, tonight, we're going to connect the dots because once you see the full picture, you're going to understand why this story just crossed the line that Congress can't walk back from. Don't forget to subscribe, guys. I really do appreciate your support. I was looking at a statistic and it shows that only approximately 17% of people watching the show are subscribed. So make sure you don't forget to subscribe. I really appreciate your support. Let's talk about the numbers, okay? Let's start with the numbers that blew the doors off this entire story. $9 billion. That's not a typo. That is not a rounding error. That is not political spin. That is the figure that federal investigators are now staring at as they review years and years of taxpayer-funded programs that are flowing through Minnesota's welfare system. And if I'm being entirely honest, by the time I release this video, wouldn't be surprised if that number is even bigger than that. And the moment that the numbers surfaced, everything changed. Because once you cross into the billions, this is no longer a state issue. This becomes a federal credibility crisis. Congress can ignore noise, Congress can ignore outrage, but Congress cannot ignore a $9 billion exposure that's tied to federal dollars. That money didn't come from Minnesota alone. It came from taxpayers across all 50 states. And so when that much money disappears under the banner of social services, Washington has a responsibility to act or admit it's broken. That's why removal conversations are happening right now. Not because of ideology, not because of rhetoric, but because $9 billion forces accountability, whether politicians like it or not. And so that kind of brings us directly to why Minnesota became the epicenter. So this didn't happen overnight. That's what makes it so dangerous, guys. Minnesota didn't wake up one morning and lose control. What happened instead was a slow erosion of oversight. Year after year, program after program, and spending ballooned and safeguards quietly disappeared. Welfare programs expanded, Medicare reimbursement surged, housing assistance exploded, nutrition programs scaled rapidly, and with each expansion came less verification, fewer audits, and more blind trust. That is how systemic fraud works. It doesn't crash the system, it infects it. By the time investigators noticed the numbers no longer made sense, the money was already gone. Entire programs had multiplied far beyond their original projections. Payments were being approved faster than they could be reviewed, and accountability became an afterthought. Minnesota didn't become ground zero because of one bad actor. It became ground zero because the system was built to be exploited and no one stopped it in time. And so once word got out, it got worse. And so here's where the story takes a darker turn. Federal investigators started using a phrase called fraud tourism. And that phrase didn't come from cable news. It came from prosecutors. They say word spread quickly at first that Minnesota had become a place where fraud was easy, where programs paid fast, where oversight was thin, where verification was minimal. And once that reputation took hold, people didn't just exploit it locally. They traveled for it. Investigators describe individuals coming from other states, setting up shell nonprofits or other service providers, filing claims, collecting massive payouts, and then disappearing. Not hiding, not sneaking around, just walking straight through an open door. That's the key point here. Fraud tourism only exists when a system invites it. And when federal agencies realize people are crossing state lines to exploit taxpayer-funded programs, that's when it stops being a bookkeeping issue and it becomes a federal enforcement priority. Which brings us to exactly what they're actually billing for. Now, this is very important, especially for those of you on Medicare, because this story highlights something that most people, they don't even realize until it's too late. Most retirees don't lose coverage because they did something wrong. They lose it because their Medicare plan quietly changes year after year. Not with a headline, not with a warning, just small shifts behind the scenes, networks tightening, benefits shrink, costs creep up. One viewer told me, I didn't realize how bad my plan had gotten until Chapter walked me through it. This is exactly what Chapter does, guys. They track those hidden changes and they make sure that your Medicare coverage stays strong before gaps turn into surprise bills. And this doesn't cost you anything. It's totally free. And most people are actually already calling the phone number at the bottom of the screen right now, or they're going to the website, link in the description down below, to have their plan checked. That phone number again is 909-563-8279. It's a quick review, totally free, and it can save you from the kind of quiet breakdowns that we're talking about tonight. All right, so let's get back to the story. This wasn't one program. This is the mistake that people keep making. Investigators began with feeding programs, claims that were meant to help children that exploded far beyond realistic need. Then they followed the money into housing stabilization. This is where the cost multiplied at staggering speed. Then into home health services, where billing skyrocketed without matching care. And finally into autism service claims, where reimbursement surged with minimal documentation. Different programs, same pattern. Rapid expansion, minimal verification, massive payouts, little follow-up. That's not coincidence. This is a system repeating the same failure over and over and over. And when you see identical behavior across unrelated programs, investigators stop asking who slipped through the cracks and start asking who designed the cracks. This is why the story keeps widening. Because every new program reviewed doesn't close the case, it adds another layer to the case. And eventually Washington has to ask who was closest to the policies that made this possible. Yeah, this is where the story stops being abstract and it starts getting personal for Congress. Because regardless of intent, Ilhan Omar is not a distant observer here. She is a lawmaker whose district became the epicenter of this collapse and whose legislative priorities directly shape the policy environment investigators are now tearing apart. That part matters. Members of Congress, they don't just vote, they influence funding streams. They shape oversight requirements. They decide whether safeguards stay in place or get loosened in the name of access and equity. When a district tied to those same policy decisions becomes synonymous with unchecked fraud, Congress doesn't need a criminal conviction to ask serious questions. Political responsibility exists before legal guilt. This is why the conversation shifted so fast. The moment investigators connected massive fraud to programs that were shaped by congressional action, Washington couldn't pretend that this was merely a state failure. That proximity alone forces scrutiny, and scrutiny leads to consequences. So here's a part many politicians fear more than indictments: optics. What does it look like, right? Yeah, because even when donations are legal, associations still matter. When individuals later implicated in fraud have ties, financial or political, to an elected official, Congress doesn't ask whether a law was technically broken. It asks whether public trust was compromised. That's the reality of federal politics. This isn't about proving intent. It's about exposure. It's about whether voters believe that their representatives are insulated from or entangled with systems that failed catastrophically. Once investigators began mapping money flows, relationships, proximity, even indirect connections become liability. And Congress reacts to liability fast, especially when the numbers reach the billions. This is why this story couldn't just stay buried in court filings. The optics alone created a pressure wave no leadership team could have absorbed quietly. And once optics turn toxic, the conversation always moves in the same direction: damage control or removal. This is the moment the tone in Washington changed, because when investigators start asking where money ends up, not just where it starts, the issue shifts from policy to security. Federal agencies treat large-scale fraud completely differently once funds move overseas, pass through unregulated channels, or disappear beyond U.S. oversight. This is not speculation. This is standard enforcement protocol. So when billions of dollars leave federal funded programs without clear tracking, intelligence agencies, they don't shrug. It triggers reviews, briefings, and risk assessments. Not because every dollar funds something dangerous, but because the system allowed blind exits. And that's what set off alarm bells. This story stopped being about mismanagement and it became more about exposure. exposure of federal programs, exposure of taxpayer trust, exposure of national vulnerabilities created by lax controls. And so once national security enters the conversation, even indirectly, Congress loses the luxury of delay because ignoring it isn't neutral, it's negligent. And that's when Republicans change their language from consent to consequence. So this is where people misunderstand, okay? They're misunderstanding what's really happening. Expulsion isn't a soundbite. It's a constitutional mechanism, and it's rarely discussed because it's politically dangerous, right up until leadership believes not acting is worse than that. Now, Republicans aren't talking about expulsion over rhetoric or even tweets or ideology. They're pointing to something far more corrosive, a congressional district tied to systemic fraud on a federal scale, paired with policy decisions that reduced oversight. Congress has one core obligation: to safeguard federal funds. When that obligation collapses publicly, accountability becomes unavoidable. And expulsion doesn't require a criminal conviction. It requires a determination that continued service damages the institution itself. This is why this conversation is happening right now, not because of headlines, but because trust is eroding in real time. Once Congress believes that a member's presence threatens credibility, the math changes real fast. And timing matters, especially under this administration. Timing matters, and this story is landing a very different Washington. See, under Donald J. Trump, the federal enforcement looks nothing like it did a few years ago. This administration has made fraud, crackdowns, clawbacks, and aggressive oversight a priority, especially when taxpayer money is involved. That changes how Congress calculates risk. Agencies are no longer incentivized to slow walk politically sensitive cases. Inspectors generals, they have more latitude. Federal prosecutors are less cautious about optics. And congressional leadership knows that ignoring massive exposure now invites executive pressure later. This is why removal talk accelerated, because if Congress doesn't act first, enforcement may force action anyway. Now, this isn't theoretical. We've already seen tougher stances on misuse of funds, sharper audits, and faster escalation when programs fail. So in this environment, hesitation isn't safety, it's liability. And lawmakers understand that under President Trump, the cost of inaction is higher than the cost of confrontation. Now, here's the bigger truth, and it is uncomfortable for both parties. This is not just about Ilhan Omar. She is the flashpoint, but not the full story. What's really being tested is whether Americans still believe social programs can exist without being looted. I mean, whether Congress is even capable of policing itself, and whether taxpayers still trust matters when failure becomes public. Because if a $9 billion collapse can happen in one state under one set of policies, voters will naturally ask, where else are the same vulnerabilities in existence? That's the danger that Washington's staring at right now. So if Congress treats this as a one-off, it signals tolerance. If it acts decisively, well, it signals reform. And that change, that choice will ripple far beyond Minnesota. So Ilhan Omar's name may be on the headline, but the consequences, they reach every federal program that was built on trust rather than verification. And that's why this moment matters so much. See, if Congress moves forward, this doesn't end with a headline. It begins a process. Committees expand their scope, investigators widen their lens, more programs come under review, more documents get subpoenaed, and political isolation sets up fast. Leadership distances itself. Allies, they go quiet, doors close. This is how Washington works when risk becomes radioactive. Even without criminal charges, the damage, it compounds. Committee assignments vanish, influence evaporates, reputations calcify, and every new revelation feeds the next phase of scrutiny. So at the same time, Congress sends a signal internally and publicly that systemic failure has consequences, that federal funds aren't untouchable, and that no district is too protected to question. But there's another outcome lawmakers are weighing just as carefully. If Congress hesitates, if it stalls, deflects, or delays, it invites deeper intervention from enforcement agencies, and that is a far messier outcome politically. So this isn't about punishment. It's about control of the narrative versus surrendering it. And that brings us to the question hanging over everything here. Here's the question that Congress cannot escape no matter how hard it tries. If lawmakers act here, what precedent does that set? Like, does it mean Congress will finally enforce accountability when federal programs collapse under fraud? Does it restore even a sliver of public trust? Or doesn't expose how rare the accountability actually is. But if Congress doesn't act, if it shrugs at $9 billion, systemic failure, and national exposure, what message does that send? That oversight is optional? That scale erases responsibility? That power protects itself? This moment right here forces a choice between institutional accountability and political protection. And that choice will define more than one career. It will define whether Americans still believe Congress exists to protect taxpayer money or merely to manage fallout when it disappears. That's why this story matters. And that is why it spread. And that, my friends, this is why Washington can't walk it back. I'll go ahead and leave it right there. And if you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to give the video a like, subscribe, and share, because these are the stories you won't hear explained honestly anywhere else. So drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you next time. Take care.